everybody, welcome back to my channel, or if this is your first time visiting, hello, thank you so much for stopping by. Today I want to share with you our birth story. So this little guy is Harrison James, and he joined our family on the 30th of April. He was 8 pounds exactly, and he was 22 inches long. So, So I want to share his story with you. I went back and forth about how much I wanted to share, and because of the way that things came about, I really felt led to share. It's a good way to document for me and for me to remember the things that happened, but I also want to share because there are some things that happened that I think are valuable and that need to be talked about. So when you are watching this, I am 2 weeks postpartum. So right now I'm like a week and a half when I'm filming this. So I guess I'll just kind of give you a little bit of backstory as far as my other 2 births, and then we'll kind of go into it with this one. I want to keep this really brief. I don't think I've ever really done a full birth story on my channel, but basically my other 2 children were hospital births. They were fairly quick for my first and second children. I had an epidural with both. It was successful. I had a delivery with no complications and a recovery with no complications. So there were lots of little nuances and differences between the 2 births. With my son, my water broke first. With my daughter, the contractions started first, and so those labors were very different. I didn't know until after having my son and after having that water breaking experience that actually when your water breaks, your labor is more intense because you don't have that sort of cushion of amniotic fluid around the baby. So that was different as far as, you know, the 2 different labors. By the time I got the epidural with my son, I was really in a lot of pain. And with my daughter, I was feeling the contractions. I was in a lot of discomfort, but it wasn't as intense as with my son. So basically, in a nutshell, those are my birth stories with my firstborn, my son, and then my middle child, my daughter. So this 3rd pregnancy, we did find out the gender. We were expecting a boy, and his due date was May 17th. So I've talked about this a couple of times throughout the pregnancy, but I just carry really large in my belly. And I talked about kind of, you know, the comments people would make and kind of my journey through that bothering me and then just not letting it bother me and let it roll off. But people are just really observant and really vocal, especially when you're pregnant, to point out changes in your body as if you're not aware of them. So that was something that I dealt with a lot through my pregnancy, was just I carry very big and people like to point it out. So we suspected that he might come early. I was hoping that he might come early, and we suspected that he might be on the bigger side. So around like 34, 35 weeks, my doctor said, why don't we do a growth scan just to kind of see where we are. If it's looking like he's going to be bigger than your daughter was, then we might want to induce you at 39 weeks. My daughter weighed 8 pounds, 12 ounces, and she came 4 days before her due date. So she was a larger baby. So we did go ahead and do the growth scan at 36 weeks. I've never had a growth scan before. I've pretty much had like the initial ultrasound, the anatomy ultrasound, and like that's pretty much been it. My husband was off because it was Easter Monday, and that was a home day for school anyway, even if we had been in session. So the whole family got to go, and that was really special. During the growth scan, he did measure large. So we were at 36 weeks. He was already measuring right around 39 or 40. His head was measuring at like 40 weeks, and it was in the 98th, 99th percentile. And they were estimating that his weight was at the 8 pound, 4 ounce mark. Right away, I felt a lot of fear. I felt afraid of what might happen. I felt afraid of all of these unknown variables. And I knew right away that this is not of the Lord. You know, right away I thought of 2 Timothy, whenever Paul is talking to Timothy and he is saying, God has not given you a spirit of fear, but he has given you a spirit of power and love and self-control. And I just thought, you know, in the same way that Paul is encouraging Timothy that God has not given you a spirit of fear, God has not given me a spirit of fear. So I knew that this fear that I was feeling was not of God, and I just needed to pray that God would handle the situation as it should be handled, and that he would come how and when he was supposed to. Following the growth scan, I had a doctor's appointment, and you know, we were talking about the size of the baby, and the doctor was, I was saying, is this cause for concern? And he said, you know, well, the bigger the baby is, you know, the more at risk you are for needing to have an emergency C-section, that kind of thing. But he said, your pelvis has already proven that you can deliver an 8-pound, 12-ounce baby. So I think we're going to be okay, but we may be looking at more of a 9-pound baby. And then the negative thoughts started to creep in again. And I started thinking, you know, I've done a lot of late night snacking this pregnancy. I've gained more weight this pregnancy than I ever have before. And I thought, you know, maybe this is my fault. Maybe if I had had better eating habits and not snacked at night and et cetera, maybe I wouldn't have such a large baby. And, you know, I shared those thoughts with my husband and with my sister, and they were very quick to shut those down. Don't go to that place. That is not necessarily a direct correlation to you having a larger baby. And it's just such a blessing to have people in your life to be able to voice those thoughts to, and be honest whenever your mind kind of goes to negative places. It's good to have those people that can go, shut that down. That's not truth. That is not good. You know, look somewhere else. So we've had the growth scan, and now we're at that 36-week mark. So now we're at the point where we will be coming for appointments every week. So they said, we will schedule your induction next week. So that Sunday was my birthday. It was April 27th. And I really wanted to share my birthday with my son. So I tried everything that I could think of, all the wives' tales, all of the little things, to try to see if I could kind of coax him into coming early on my birthday. Now, I know from having my daughter that what I believe about babies is that they come when they want to. I think that all of the wives' tales, the Miles circuit, the getting on the exercise ball, the eating spicy food, eating pineapple, whatever, all of the things, I think that those things can help to push you over that edge if you're already there anyway. But I became a little anxious on that day because I was doing all those things, and I went and got a pedicure, and I ate like a whole pineapple. And I thought, what if he comes too soon? And I thought, none of these things are going to make him come unless he's already ready to come. So I did all of the things. Sunday came and went, and nothing happened. So we went back to the doctor on that Monday. I'm 37 weeks at this point, and they actually said, we will schedule your induction when you come back next week. So they didn't do a cervical check or anything. They did feel like he was engaged in my pelvis, and so we were getting closer, but that's kind of how we left things. Okay, so that's the 28th at this point. So the 29th, I usually teach 1 day a week at my kids' homeschool. So I went, I taught a full day, and I got home and I told my husband that was not fun. I did not enjoy that. Just the walking and the climbing upstairs and the standing and sitting, and I was so hot. So this is kind of getting into the part of the story where we start to give a few details. So I'll try to not be graphic, but also I have a background in medicine, so like nothing bothers me. So I got home, I ended up having to change because sometimes with pregnancy you just have to. And I told my husband it had been a hard day. So my son had a soccer game that night, and I was into it. It is the most aggressive I have ever seen him play. He scored the first goal of the game for his team, and I was up and down and yelling and taking videos and all of this stuff. And I said you know, to my family sitting there, I said, well, maybe this will put me into labor, you know. So after that, I wanted to go to Walmart and get another pineapple and a couple of other things I don't remember. So we had ridden separately. My husband drove the kids home and I went to Walmart. I will insert a clip here. I was taking this funny video to see how I looked from the back, because people say, you know, you don't look pregnant from the back. I absolutely think that's false. But anyway, I took this video and you can kind of see just how big and how low my belly was. So throughout the course of both the soccer game and the trip to Walmart, there were several times when I felt something and I thought, maybe my water broke. But if you have been pregnant or talked to a pregnant woman, sometimes it's hard to tell. Did my water break or was it just something else? It was really difficult to tell. So I got home, I still couldn't tell, but I thought, I'm just gonna try inching things in that way again. So we got the kids to bed. It's late at this point. I did the mile circuit, which, if you are unfamiliar, the mile circuit is a series of positions that you hold for a prolonged period of time that are supposed to get baby in a good position for delivery. So the first one is you do sort of like a modified child's pose. So you are face down, you've kind of got your bottom up in the air and your chest is as close to the ground as you can get it. So it's this prolonged stretch and you hold that for 30 minutes. Which is a lot. I started to do it on my yoga mat and I thought my knees are not going to handle this, and I did it on the bed. And then after that, you do a prolonged side lying. You put one leg up on a bunch of pillows, kind of at a bent angle, and you hold that for 30 minutes. And for that one, I actually fell asleep. And my husband came and woke me up. And then after that, you do some sort of like alternating motion. So it can be curb walking or walking on a step, like a step stool. So that's what I did. You can also do like side lunges, or you can go sideways up and down stairs. But basically it's just kind of getting your pelvis in that movement where you're kind of going up and down uneven. So I did all of that, and then I took a shower, and then while I was doing my skincare and everything, I sat on the birthing ball and just kind of did some movements. So by the time I went to bed on Tuesday, it was this really Wednesday morning, it was late. It was 1:45 when I finally went to bed. I woke up just an hour later at 2:45, and I woke up feeling like I had broken my water. I didn't wake Brandon up yet. I came to the bathroom just to kind of confirm that's what it was, and I was pretty sure. So I woke him up and I said, I think we need to go. And we debated back and forth, but we live a good 45-50 minutes from the hospital, and I wanted to make sure that we had enough time. I was a little worried that we were going to get there and them say, no, your water didn't break, you just, you know, had an incontinent moment, and then I was going to be super embarrassed that we had to go back home. But anyway, I called my parents. Luckily they live next door, so they were able to come over and stay with the kids while we went to the hospital. So I've written down timestamps. I went back and thought through the story and looked at my text messages so that I could remember it from this point on. Okay, so 2:45, I woke up to my water breaking. We got to the hospital just a little over an hour later. At 3:53, we arrived at the hospital. So they got us into triage. They got me hooked up on the monitor and everything. And then the way that they confirm whether or not your water has broken is they do a swab test, and that swab is taken to the lab and they confirm whether or not it is amniotic fluid. So I pretty much was just in the hospital room, just kind of relaxing, resting. I'm not feeling anything at this point. Eventually, a little after 5, they did come back and say that the swab was positive for amniotic fluid. So that meant that we were staying. So at that point, we got up, we walked to a regular room, and our hospital, I don't know how most hospitals are. I know some of them used to be you delivered in a separate room and then you moved to a recovery room. I really like that our hospital is you go in a room and that's where you are for the duration of your stay. So your bed kind of comes apart for the delivery, and then they kind of put the end back on. but it's all done in that same room. So at that point, you know, I got in my room sometime a little after 6 and I stayed there. I was having contractions. They were supposedly like 17 minutes apart. I could not feel them at all. So the physician attending at this point was a midwife, and she came in. She tried to check me and was unsuccessful. My cervix was at a place where it was too painful and too, I guess, like far back, like kind of behind the baby's head. And she said, we're just going to call you closed. She said, I can't even reach it. She said, you're obviously not in a place where you're ready to give birth. So she said, what I think we need to do at this point is start Pitocin, which I have no experience with and I'm a little leery of just because I haven't experienced it. I know people that have had really good experiences with it, and then I know people that have had the opposite. And of course that's the case with anything that you hear. You'll hear good things and bad things. She said, I think we need to do Pitocin because you're really not in labor. And she said, we need to get things moving. The longer that your water has broken, the more susceptible you are to infection, and we really don't want you going beyond 24 hours of when your water broke. And because I had kind of had those few episodes during the day on Tuesday, we don't truly know when my water broke. It could have been right after school when I got home and I had to change, or it could have been at the soccer game or at Walmart, or it could have truly been whenever I felt the bigger amount at 2:45 that morning. So she said, I think we need to start Pitocin. So I said, okay. I said, is it possible for me to just try to see if I can get things moving on my own first through positioning? And she said, sure, that's an option. I said, could we maybe try positioning for an hour or so and then come back and check on things? And then if we've not progressed at all, maybe then do Pitocin. So that was what we did. So I continued with the Miles circuit. I continued with being on the birthing ball a little bit. And so I just continued doing my positioning, and I alternated listening to praise and worship music and listening to my Christian hypnobirthing app. It's got positive affirmations and breathing techniques and just all kinds of stuff. It's very helpful. I used it with my second pregnancy during my delivery and in the months leading up to it. By that point, it was change of shift and a different doctor came in. This was like at 8:30. He said, I actually have a different thought. He said, I think giving you Pitocin now is just going to put you in a lot of unnecessary pain. He said, you're not in labor yet. So he said, what I think we need to do is give you a cervix ripening agent and just see what that does. And then we can look at maybe starting Pitocin. So they gave me a medicine called Cytotec to kind of ripen my cervix. And that was at 8:30, and they said, we will come back and touch base with you in 4 hours at 12:30. So we'll let that kind of do its thing. You can try to do some positioning as well, and we'll see how it goes. So at 8:30, whenever that doctor came in, he did end up checking me while he gave me the Cytotec. He said that I was 3 centimeters dilated, I was 50% effaced, and I had a -3 station, which meant that the baby did still have to descend quite a bit before we were ready for birth. So during that time, once they had inserted the Cytotec, I did all of the same things again. I did positioning, I did the birthing ball. I don't remember if I did the peanut ball at that point. Maybe I also did the peanut ball some. But gradually it got to the point where I was going, hold on, I think I feel that contraction. And then they got to the point where, oh, that's like a 2 or 3 pain level. And then, okay, that's like a 4 or 5. And then it finally got to the point where it was like a 7 or 8 pain level. And I would say that I'm somebody that doesn't have very high pain tolerance. So I was ready for the epidural. But the only issue was they couldn't give it to me yet because it had not reached that 12:30 point. So I called my nurse in and shared my concerns with her. I said, I'm concerned at this point. We went from not moving very fast to now these contractions are intense, and they were 2 to 3 minutes apart at this point. So at this point I thought, what if I don't get it? What if I have to deliver without an epidural? And that just really wasn't my goal. So she listened to me, she heard my concerns, and we went ahead and got the ball rolling. We went ahead and ran my bag of fluid. They got the epidural cart in there. She called the anesthesiologist. So once it reached 12:30, instead of starting the process then, it was like at that point the anesthesiologist came in and we were ready to go. So I think I was getting the epidural by like 12:40, and it was taking effect, you know, in those 15-20 minutes after that. So at this point, it was very much like Andy's birth story. They gave me the epidural, and with Andy, they broke my water. I think they did go in, and there was still like a fluid sac there, and at some point they broke it with this baby. I don't remember when. But at this point, I started doing the peanut ball because, of course, I had the epidural, so I couldn't be up and down anymore. But they put me on one side, and then after a while, they moved me and put me on the second side. And it really was so much like Andy. They moved me to that second side, and I was there for just a little bit, and I told my husband, I think we need to get them to come and check me. So both with my daughter and with this one, I could feel that pressure. I could feel that the baby was there and that it was time. So the doctor came in and did confirm that, and I think I maybe pushed 5 times, and he was here. He came so fast that he didn't get a chance to push out all of the amniotic fluid. So for his first 24 hours, he was like choking on it and coughing and sputtering some, which is to be expected. It also like affected his meconium. Whenever he had those first few diapers, the texture was very different than what I'd remembered with my other babies. And that was because of the amniotic fluid. So that was his birth. We spent the first hour together, just the 3 of us. And then after that, Brandon went downstairs and got our kids. They had been with the grandparents, so they got to meet him. And then the grandparents came in. So my delivery was beautiful, perfect, no complications. Unfortunately, my recovery was a little different. So like I said, we had the hour with ourselves, and then we had the kids come in, and then grandparents came in. So I forgot to mention, the baby was born at 3:13 in the afternoon. So at this point, you know, grandparents were in, and I'm sitting in the bed. They've, you know, removed the epidural from my back, and I'm slowly regaining feeling. They're also having to come in and push on my belly as they do every 15 minutes. And that's one of my least favorite parts because it's so painful, but I understand they have to do it. But when they are pushing, my bleeding is not slowing down. And in addition to that, there would be times when I was just sitting there and I would just feel a large amount just kind of release. And so I called in the nurse and shared with her what I had felt. And so she kind of took a look at me, and she said, I'm not comfortable. She said, you're not losing too much, but it should be slowing down at this point. So they did a couple things at this point to try to slow that bleeding down. They gave me the same Cytotec that they'd given me to ripen my cervix. It can also like stop bleeding. So they gave that to me in my mouth, like to dissolve. And then they also gave me some Pitocin, and those were not having the effect they had hoped they would. So anyway, now we're somewhere around 5:30, 6:30 in the evening, and the bleeding has not slowed down like they hoped it would. So the doctor, who we loved, came back in, and he sat on the bed and he said, I'm not comfortable with the amount of bleeding that you're having. So he said, we think there is still something inside your uterus, and we're going to have to go in and retrieve it. He said, we're going to give you some strong pain medicine, and I'm going to have to go in and remove whatever it is by hand. Right away, I'm thinking about how painful this is sounding. I'm also thinking about that it just sounds, you know, kind of scary. But you do what you have to do in these situations, right? So he told the nurse to go get the ultrasound cart and the hemorrhage cart, and that was hard to hear. So they brought in the ultrasound, and he showed me the screen, and he said, here's your uterus, and you see this little like fuzzy area. This is something in your uterus that should not be there, and we've got to go in and get it out. So he gave me the pain medicine. Before I knew it, there were like 5 nurses in the room. I had one holding each hand. All right, I'm gonna have to take an intermission and I'll be back. All right, we are nursing at this point, so maybe I can tell you the last little bit. So before I knew it, there were like 5 nurses in the room, and I had one holding each of my hands, and they had given me the pain medicine, and they had to go in and retrieve whatever it was that was still behind. So at this point, it was very intense. It was incredibly painful. I was praying out loud. I was reciting scripture. I had my eyes closed and was just doing the very best that I could. What happened next was really shocking to me. They removed a second placenta. They said whenever I gave birth and then the placenta came after, it was completely intact. I asked to see it because, like I said, nothing bothers me and I find it interesting. And I also find it educational, you know, to share with my children. This is what my body did. It grew a whole organ to supply what this whole baby needs that my body also grew. You know, it's just really cool. Is that pee or poop? That seems like poop. Is that poop? Did you poop? That's something. Pee or poop, I don't know. So I had seen the placenta and they said, you know, it looked fully intact. So this is something that can sometimes happen, is you can have this accessory lobe placenta, this entirely second placenta. Now I had several people ask me, does this mean that you at one point had twins, you know, and you lost the other one? The doctor said most likely not. I guess that is a possibility, but more than likely this is just something that happened for who knows what reason. And it was pretty wild. I mean, it wasn't as large as the first placenta, but it, you know, they held it with 2 hands. That's how large it was. So they removed that, and then they repeated the ultrasound, and there was still more in there. So they had to go back in a second time, and then what they called that was just membranous tissue. At that point, the ultrasound read clear, and they were satisfied that they had gotten everything. But it was truly wild. We had full confidence in our doctor, and he handled the situation with calm and wasn't rattled by it at all. I'm sure that they've had, you know, things like this happen before. But, you know, I was sharing with our pediatrician at his first appointment about this, and he was just saying, you know, this is one of the reasons why so many women died in childbirth, you know, in the 1800s and early 1900s, is because they wouldn't have had technology like this to know that there was still remaining tissue there. So, you know, to think that had I gone home, you know, I probably would have hemorrhaged is just, it's scary. So I'm really just so thankful that he is here and he's okay. And I am so thankful that I am here and that I am okay, because for a few minutes, it was scary, and I never imagined that something like this would or could happen. As far as recovery at home, it has been wonderful. I've had my husband home for the first week and a half from work, so it has been so nice with nighttime feedings. A lot of times he will get up and change the baby's diaper and then hand him to me. And if I've fed him and then I'm having trouble getting him down or getting him to burp, Brandon will get up and help me with that. He's asked me, you know, he'll ask me what I need and if I want something to eat or drink, and he fixes those things for me. So it has just been really nice. Nursing, we are getting better at that every day, and we're just kind of falling into a rhythm. So yeah, like I said, whenever you see this, we are exactly 2 weeks from our delivery, and I am just so thankful. Everything is really going well. The female body to me is just amazing. When we got home from the hospital, I was 15 pounds less than whenever I went in. Since that time, I've lost 10 additional pounds, so I'm down like 25, 26 pounds now. And I know everybody's body is different, but it's just so amazing to me that, you know, your body just does what it needs to do for your baby. It really is amazing to me that your heart just has the capacity to keep growing. With every child, I think you tend to think, how can I love one more as much as I love my other ones? And, you know, how can I have room in my heart for more? And then you just always do, you know? It's just a really miraculous thing. So yeah, I'm just really, really grateful, really thankful to have my child safely here, for me to be here safely, and it feels good to be able to share this with you. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope that you found it valuable, and at least now you have heard of that this is something that can happen. So if you know of somebody that this happens to, you know, you can tell them they are not the only ones. Thank you guys so much for stopping by my channel. If this is your first time stopping by, please consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing. I love to just share the joys of life, which for me is just family life and secondhand shopping and everything that that encompasses. So thank you again for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Gracious. Gracious. Gracious me.